Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer and publisher of Melior Via. I'm up here at Immortals Inc. to talk role-playing games, and tonight thought we'd talk a little bit about this campaign book from Dungeons & Dragons, Tales from the Yawning Portal. Now, this one is a couple of years old at this point, but I think it's one of the more important books that they've come out with for 5th edition, and I'm going to delve into that during this little discussion. And the reason that I feel that way is because this book does more to connect 5th edition with past editions and the experience players had in the past editions than really anything else that's out there. It's ostensibly a campaign, but in reality, it's just kind of a compilation of a whole bunch of different adventures that were previously published. And some of those are, well, one of them's practically brand new for 5th. Most of them go back a little bit longer than that. So it's kind of set up so that your characters have time to develop all the way from first level till they meet their end. But they're drawn on a lot of different sources there, and I'll come back and touch on how they compiled it and why they picked these a little bit. But let me just tell you the gist of what's in it first. So the first thing, the opening 2 adventures are ones that were originally published for 3rd edition D&D, right around 2000, I think. And that's The Sunless Citadel and Forge of Fury. And Mikey, hopefully you're going to pop up images of those 2 covers here for me.
I got you, John.
Awesome. Those were a couple of big adventures at the time that 3rd edition was real popular, and they were really a great intro for players to the campaign, to the whole Dungeons & Dragons system. And then after you get through those, it dives back to an older adventure, The Hidden Shrine of Tomoakan. That's a 1st edition adventure, and it's really all about being a dungeon crawl. After that is White Plume Mountain, another real early adventure that kind of drew on a lot of sources, has some it was, I think, originally written to be played as a convention tournament adventure, and it draws on, to be blunt, it draws on Elric, which, if you're familiar with Michael Moorcock's writings, is kind of a cool source, and it's got some neat puzzles in it, and it's fairly quick to play through as these things go. Then there's Dead and Thay, which was a new adventure that was part of the playtest before 5th edition came out. I think it was originally branded as D&D Next at that point, and honestly, I think the PDF of that one is probably still somewhere out there on the internet if you're looking for it. And then it goes back and hits Against the Giants, which was one of the original Gary Gygax adventures. It was published as G123. Again, Mikey's probably going to pop up the logo or the cover for that one here.
Boom.
All right. And again, was written as a tournament adventure, if memory serves, 3 parts against hill giants, frost giants, and fire giants. And that, back in the day could lead into other campaigns too, but that was a solid, iconic 1st edition adventure. And then the last one in this book, and it will almost always be the last one for any game group or any campaign, is Tomb of Horrors, which is another Gygax classic. And all of these are really adventures that delve into the whole idea of the players going into a dungeon, trying to fight their way through it, solving puzzles, overcoming monsters. And there isn't necessarily a whole lot of rhyme or reason to why all these different things are necessarily in that same dungeon together. I mean, in some cases, it's better assembled than others, but for the most part, it's just look, here's another new interesting way for player characters to die horribly. And, that sounds like a really horrible thing to do, right? In our modern gameplay where people are working to cooperatively tell a story as a group and not be confrontational. But here's the thing. These adventures, especially a couple of Gygax ones and White Plume Mountain and the Hidden Shrine of Tomoakan, were real big back in the late 70s, early 80s when D&D was first gaining a foothold. And because of that, people that were playing back then, a lot of us, and I'm one of the old ones, the hairline shows it, played through these adventures, sometimes more than once with different game groups. And sometimes that meant saying, no, really, I never read this adventure before or never played this adventure before. And yet you played it, and oftentimes, in spite of knowing what was coming, you still had horrible results. But anyway, like I was saying, this was a big deal back then. And if you sit down with a bunch of guys that have been playing since that era, they're going to have stories about how they played through them. And the thing that I think that's really neat for tying 5th edition into that whole ancestry is this gives an opportunity for people that are exploring Dungeons & Dragons now to have a very real connection with the people that played back in that era and being able to share stories with one another. I picked this up originally because my daughter wanted to play D&D with some of her friends, and she wanted me to run some stuff for them. And I'm not a real D&D guy anymore. I play a lot of other RPGs, but I figured if I was going to introduce them to the game, that they should really start with the current system, because that's what they might play if they encountered other groups as, they went around. And so I said, all right, so we're going to run 5th edition. And then I started looking through the different books that were out there, and this one immediately jumped out at me because I thought, if you play this one, it's going to give you that real connection to the people that have played before. It's going to give you a shared experience. It's going to give you the ability to sit down and talk with people and share your stories about, hey, what happened when you guys encountered this monster? Or what happened when you encountered this trap? Or wasn't this magic item just really cool? And, how many of your player characters died when you had this encounter? All of those stories are really what can provide a connection with people that played in other cities and with other groups and, decades apart. Because now we're saying people are playing this in the 2020s and people were playing this in the 1980s and every year in between.
Now, I know you can't see the background behind you, but do you care to explain what that even is or what's going on behind you?
When these adventures originally came out, they were kind of just set in the D&D world. There wasn't a whole lot of effort and time that went into saying, hey, where is this happening? Where are the players going in between adventures? That's kind of important, especially with a lot of the stuff that modern gaming's introduced. And so when the guys compiled these different adventures all together into one book, they said, hey, we need a framework. And the framework they reached out to was this bar that's in the city of Waterdeep in the Forgotten Realms. And the Forgotten Realms is probably the most commonly used D&D setting nowadays.
Especially with the Magic set that just came out recently.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on. Way to tie that in, Mikey.
Yes, I'm learning, guys.
Cross-marketing. Woohoo! So the Yawning Portal is a bar that's in Waterdeep, and it's got this massive hole in the middle of it, right? And that massive hole, I think, is right in this image here.
Oh, that's what they're swinging over.
Yeah, and this hole goes down into the dungeons that are beneath the city of Waterdeep. And I believe Undermountain is part of that. And it's this massive, inordinately huge dungeon. And adventurers would go into the Yawning Portal and get their drink on and then dare each other to basically ride this little pulley system down into the dungeon and go explore it. And so basically what they were saying for tying this into Forgotten Realms, hooking all of these different modules together, was saying, hey, what if we say those are all just different stops that people could have gotten off at when they were leaving the Yawning Portal? And so that also provides a good way for people to come and go, and a place to introduce new characters in between the adventures, and a way to get people into other Waterdeep-based activities, particularly if you're running a campaign set in the Forgotten Realms. While you can run all of these sequentially, and it more or less covers the level range, each one of these adventures is pretty well standalone. Maybe the first two are pretty linked, but beyond that, they're pretty well set up as standalones so that you could just run one of them if your player characters are in the right level range, or you could skip one of them if you say, you know what, I'm not real big on this one, and then insert something else in its place, because they're not really dependent upon the characters having encountered a specific element in a past adventure or picked up a particular magic item in a past adventure in order to be able to get through the next one. Like I said, the thing I really like about this is it gives you that connection with people that have been playing for a long time, gives you a common shared language of stories to talk about, and really it just gives you a classic feel for Dungeons & Dragons for somebody that hasn't been playing real long, while still using the system that they're currently using today, and enabling you to take characters from a modern era and put them into those adventures. And
you said this edition, you recommend this for beginners too, right?
Absolutely.
Just the way it dates back?
Yeah, so 5th edition is the current version of Dungeons & Dragons that's out there. These adventures were written for past ones, but they're all updated in this book. And it's just a solid update. It all clicks. It all works well. I've looked into a lot of other independent updates, and I've even tried to run a couple of them. And the fact of the matter is, for the most part, they're not as well done. They didn't just update stats and translate monsters. They also updated the adventures enough that you're actually using the whole 5th edition system. And they updated the maps. And my God, they're a whole lot prettier in this version. And the artwork is full color and gorgeous, like you'd expect from any 5th edition product. You know, back in 1st edition days, we were looking at everything in black and white and, you know, little paper pamphlets that were $6 each. Truth be told,
you had to imagine the scenario in your head, basically.
Well, I mean, you still have to imagine it to a degree, no question about it. But it's a lot more visceral. And honestly, bang for your buck. This is a $50 book, but you're getting 8 adventures in here. 7 adventures.
This is at Immortals Inc.?
What's that?
This is at Immortals Inc.?
This is at Immortals Inc. You guys have this on the shelf.
ImmortalsInc.com.
And those were 1970s dollars. This is easily worth $100 now, and Immortals Inc. has it for only $50.
Couldn't have said any better myself, John.
So take a look at it, give it a try, and have fun with it.
Thank you, guys.